Good morning, Ustad Khaled. Good evening, Mr. Noman. Thank you for joining me. Thanks, everybody, our listeners, our viewers. Thank you for once again tuning in to the Diwan podcast. This special episode, one more special episode that was not on our script for this month, but I really appreciate the ideas that keep coming to me, to Ali Mahmoud, our co-host, who unfortunately again can't be with us because he's traveling in southern Yemen, reporting on some news, some breaking news there. But today, thanks to Ustad Khaled, again, the best friend of the One podcast, reached out and brought up the idea that there's a need to discuss the UN panel report more into detail because of the controversies that have emerged since the first media reporting, which focused on corruption within the GOI, corruption within the Central Bank of Yemen, CBY, and corruption in Sana'a with the Houthi authorities. We saw a lot of backlash from the SDC as well, because of the way that the Southern Transitional Council was mentioned. We see the government still up until today speaking about the methodology. For example, Ustad Noman brought up an interesting point that the Prime Minister, Mr. Abdul Malik, is focusing, critiquing the UN panel report from January 2021 because of its methodology, that it's flawed. And we'll get into why those words are used, why that language is used. But we also bring this up that yesterday, I believe it was yesterday, the Prime Minister's office announced that there would be an audit of the central bank, and I believe they're going with Ernst and Young. Correct me if I'm wrong, yes, gentlemen. We'll see. I mean, the government has used auditors before and nothing has happened. Everything continues the same. And so we want today to go into details on how the panel works and how the government of Yemen works during the year with the committee, the 2140 committee at the UN Security Council. And I thank Ustad Khaled for bringing this idea, because, he's a former ambassador to the United Nations. I worked in the UN panel 2017 through March 2019, and we interacted 2017, my first year, Ustad Khaled, when you were ambassador in New York. And what we want to do is give you a little bit more of insight on how the panel works, how the report is produced. And Ustad Khaled, as a diplomat, he will tell us more about the challenges that the government of Yemen experiences looking in from the outside, because Yemen is not part of the committee. Yemen is not part of the Security Council. So Yemen is always looking from the outside. So Ustad Khaled, Ahlan, welcome once again. Thank you for joining us. Ustad Noman will help us, as our listeners may know, Ustad Mustapha Noman. He's former ambassador, Spain, correct? Former ambassador to Spain for Yemen. He has written, I focused on you, Ustad Noman, because all your writing in recent weeks, especially about this issue of corruption. So we will go through the finance section with Ustad Noman in a little bit. And then we also have another guest, Mohammed al-Shuwaiter, a young lawyer based in Canada, who will look at the IHL section. And we will look into the methodology again and everything that was brought up. Ustad Khaled, any opening remarks?
Thank you. Thank you, Fernando. Let me first of all introduce my dear colleague, Ambassador Mustapha Noman. Ambassador Mustapha Noman is the former deputy foreign minister, and is a very well-known intellectual politician and diplomat of caliber, really. And we appreciate always his inputs on every issues of domestic affairs and international affairs. He is critical to the government, to the legitimacy, and to every component in the Yemeni society, because it's the feeling that our elites failed us, and this is really harming our sentiment, that to see our people devastated and see the country fragmented, and there is no intention but to continue this war, and to continue the warlords continue living from the miseries of our people. Now the idea of this panel of experts report. The idea, as you know all, it came in 2014, early 2014, in February, when the Security Council established through Resolution 2140 the sanction regime, the sanction and travel ban. So this system was used by the then special envoy to put more pressure on the spoilers, so that the process can be, easily progressing towards the end of the transition. Then this from 2014, when the panel of experts was, because this resolution also creates the sanction committee within the Security Council, and the sanction committee invited a group of experts, and they created the panel of experts. So the panel of experts is within the mandate of the Security Council, but through the work of this committee. And the committee is formed by all member states and sitting in the council at the moment. So this mandate, the last mandate, that this report, we saw the last report of the mandate of Resolution 2511. Every year we have the renewal. The renewal will be shortly in March 28. For this group, I think there will be no changes to this group. This group will continue working, and the mandate will push for another year. Now, something Fernando just expressed is the council, is the panel of experts working within the mandate of 2140. Who will decide that? Because 2140 has been developed in the process, and in every renewal resolution, you will see the mandate getting further developed or progressed or enhanced or getting bigger. So that's why you see a lot of components coming in, and a lot of ingredients are being cooked and worked with. And one of them, you see, for example, the attack and investigation on issues related to the government corruption, issues related to the fragmentation of the legitimacy, because if you see, the liberated areas are not controlled by one command and control of the military, or command and control of the Ministry of Interior. It's now been so many ingredients. You see STC is there, the East Coast is there, and people in ties, they have total anarchy, and you don't know who is really taking control, and what's happening in Marib, a city almost under siege, and what's happening in Shabwa, what's happening in Shukra, what's happening in Hadramaut, what's happening in Mahra. So this is the idea. I will stop here, but in the process, I will explain to you the sort of challenges we face with the reporting. And I think it's very healthy, and I was inviting the group to investigate everything. If you are working under the lights of the day, you should not be afraid of any reports. If that investigation is correct, you should implement the recommendation. If it's not correct, so you have the procedure, because this report comes to you 1 month before the publishing it. So no one was reacting to it until they saw it, and they thought that a nuclear bomb was on. So
right.
It's nonsense, because this is a member state driven process. So When they publish in coordination with the government of Yemen,
Right.
and step by step they go until they publish it, the final product that you see.
Right. No, and it's interesting that, this year and last year, well, this year in July, for example, we saw that the leaks were minimal in 2020. As opposed to other years where the report is leaked earlier in December. We saw, when the panel dealt with the Iran with the Houthi missile strike in November 2017 in Riyadh, we saw that all of that information started leaking. So it's something that the panel had to deal with itself. The five of us had to deal with, being careful with how much information was put out early, and trying to trace, where the leaks were coming from, and so the interesting part this year is that, as you mentioned, the government of Yemen had the opportunity to look at this report, the draft, the early draft, early on. It was drafted by the panel, let's say, at the first week of December, last week of November. And so, when you're moving to translation, submission, translation, small editing, it's a while. And this year, as you mentioned, the reaction was late from the government of Yemen. It was after the first report by Reuters, which focused on the corruption within CBY. So now that I thank you for that introduction, Ustad Khaled, and now I want to talk to our audiences a little bit about how the panel works itself, because what we've seen from every side, every year we see accusations of bias from the part of the panel, or that the panel is shifted by one actor or another into a direction, and accusations that members of the panel have their own bias. I mean, this was one of the attacks against me for a couple of years, and all of this aims to diminish the credibility of the investigation, the findings, and the writings by the panel itself. So we have these attacks on bias and credibility, and then we have these other very soft diplomatic critiques about the methodology. So for our audiences that may not be too familiar with how this works, the panel, as Ustad Khaled described, within the UN Security Council resolution, it's a 5-member panel. It has an expert for armed groups, an expert for regional, and these two happen usually to be country experts. From then on, we have an IHL, International Humanitarian Law expert, and a weapons expert, and a finance expert. These 3 experts are subject matter experts. They're not don't have to be familiar with Yemen, don't have to be know anything about Yemen, really. They're hired because of their subject matter, and they're consultants. They're not UN bureaucrats. We're not UN staff. We are hired for a term of 11 months, and the next year is not guaranteed. So it's an annual contract. And as Ustad Khaled mentions, it all depends on the politics. It all depends on the performance, everything. Whether the individual experts are renewed year after year within the new renewal, within the renewal of the resolution. So one of the main things is, again, for me, having worked in the panel, it is in fact the panel dynamics, the team dynamics. Even though each individual is independent to pursue their investigations, there's no mandate for anyone in the group, or even as a group, to direct investigations to this side or to that side. So each one of the 5 individual experts, based on the information they have, based on their subject matter expertise, looks into the conflict and identifies areas to investigate. And as individuals, each one goes after the investigation, goes after the information. Of course, we're supposed to cooperate. We're supposed to provide and facilitate access to information, access to sources. For me, this was one of the major things. When I was invited first in 2016, there's an open call online for experts to apply to every panel on the UN Security Council. And then this happens around December of every year. And between January and March, as Ustad Khaled mentions, is when SCAD, the office in New York, starts interviewing, starts looking through CVs, starts interviewing, and starts choosing the best candidates to interview and then move forward. I was asked to join early in 2017, but late in the process, around February of 2017, and this was based on one of their people noticing my writings and my commentary on Yemen and invited me to apply. So I was honored to have served for 2 years as the armed groups expert in 2017 and the regional expert in 2018. For me, it was great because it gave me an opportunity, just like here with Diwan, to exploit my contacts in Yemen. Spent almost 17 years at the time in Yemen, knowing people and across the political spectrum. And I traveled every month. I went everywhere where there was a Yemeni of interest, and met with people face to face and asked them, for their insight, for information to help my investigations and my colleagues' investigations as well. It's something that if I could gather information from another investigation, I would pass on. Problem with with every panel is that, again, the subject matter experts don't know Yemen, and the issue here that creates this image of bias is that they have limited access to sources themselves. They have to rely on other people to provide them information and to provide them access to sources. So if if the finance section, it's either institutional memory and the contacts are passed on to the next finance expert to go and reach out to those sources wherever they may be. There may be government officials, there may be businessmen, there may be NGOs, but he also or she reaches out to different Yemeni actors to request information. And then the problem we have is a lot of people do close the doors. We have to be honest here. There's a lot of people who say, no, I'm not interested, or yes, later, and no, it doesn't materialize that access. And that creates very difficult situation for the members of panels. And we have to be honest, and this is my critique, and I will agree with a lot of people. When you're accessing UN agencies for information, this is very myopic. This is very limited, and in itself guides you to one direction because the legacy of UN organizations. And I'm going to be honest, because this podcast is about real information and being honest. When we look at the history of UN agencies in Sana'a or in Aden, who has populated those agencies with staff? With in the Ali Abdullah Saleh time, it was a very limited amount group of people that had access to jobs at the UN, and these were political people, from one party or another party. And one of the things that I noticed in 2017, for example, I could tell where my folks, my colleagues, my experts were getting their information because of who was criticizing my writing. So if Islah had a critique of my writing, if I wrote about Islah and everything, and the critique of my information or my writing or my position on the panel came from Islam, like, well, you need to go somewhere else and start talking to somebody from a different political party so you can get a different view. And when we see the IHL experts, their investigations, I know that they reach out to a lot of people, but not everybody responds. So that in itself limits the direction of the information and the outcome in the writing. So from every time I've had a conversation with the Southern colleagues, Southern friends, or Islah or Houthi or Motamar, and I said, if you don't make yourself available to the panel of experts, to the individual experts, they're never going to write what you want them to write. They're not going to listen to what you have to say because They don't have that information. And one of my critiques in the episode 3, where Ali Mahmoud and I went through the panel, was that this report was short, which to me was very, I was very surprised when I saw the length of the text. The text is only 50 pages. The report is 200 and some pages, 230 pages, but the 190, 180 pages are for annexes. But the text is the report, and that's 50 pages. When it used to be, 80, 90 pages long. You have 2 IHL experts on the panel. The armed and regional positions are in under one person since last year. There's been a lot of talk since I was on the panel that there is no need to have 2 different experts, one for arms and one for regional, that both of these portfolios should be under the country expert, but that the focus should be on finance, weapons, and IHL. That's what the mandate goes, and that the armed groups and regional only provide context for the conflict. So this is again where we hear about from DOY and other critics about the methodology. The methodology is flawed, and they focus on the composition of the panel. So for me, for this year, I understand that the Southerners are upset, disappointed that other issues were not dealt with in the IHL, such as the kidnapping, the execution of people during peaceful protest, unarmed people. That the panel didn't look into Shebwa, for example, didn't look into the situation in Aden before the clashes last summer in 2020. That there hasn't been enough focus on Hodeidah, for example. There was nothing on Al-Jawf, for example, of the operation by Houthis in Al-Jawf in February, March of 2020. The taking of the homes, the IDP situation that was created when the Houthis moved into Al-Jawf. There's nothing about Sada, the border, for example. There's nothing about the airstrikes in Hajjah and Al-Jawf that hit the civilian homes either. And so for me, there was a need for another 30 pages just on from these 2 sides. And I'm sure that the GOI, that the government of Yemen, wanted more about the trials themselves that are taking place in Sana'a by the Houthis. That they wanted more to hear about the Houthis in Taiz. The panel did an excellent job focusing on Taiz in the schools. The use of schools by militia, by military units. That was a great start. But where was the other side too? Where was the acts by the Houthis as well? And so our audience, Yemenis, need to understand that their complaints are legitimate. But if the SDC does not reach out to the panel, if the SDC does not make itself available to the panel, their voice is not going to be heard through the panel. Through the panel reports. The same thing for the Houthis. The Houthis do not recognize the resolution. They do not recognize resolution 2216. They do not recognize resolution 2140. So they don't allow the panel to visit Sana'a. Just when the report came out, Mohammed Ali al-Houthi made a statement and said, "We are inviting the members of the Security Council to come to Sana'a to investigate." But it's not their role to investigate. The ambassadors don't go anywhere to investigate. It's the panel that's supposed to go into Sana'a and investigate and have access. When I was in the panel, we wanted access to the prisons in Aden. We were not granted access to the prisons in Aden, but other NGOs were granted access to the prisons in Aden. It's the same thing that we said for Taiz. We requested nearly every other month. We requested access to Taiz. We were not given access to Taiz. We requested access to Mukalla. We were not given access to Mukalla. This 2020 is the first time the panel visits Madib and Mukalla, but still until today has not visited Sana'a. So for me, I'll slow it down here and hand it over to you, Ustad Khaled. This is just something that I would want our audiences and Yemenis on the ground to understand where the perceived bias comes from. And this is just natural human interaction and the consequence of the conflict itself.
I think the lack of knowledge is very important. I mean, element to take into consideration. People really don't know really the making of these reports and how it come to be a document or as I used to mention it, a very important instrument of international law when it comes to the Yemeni court. I remember, for example, when I was trying to persuade the government on how to use the findings of the report. You remember during your time how to use this finding in your favor by just uh, uh, by campaigning internationally, using UN document as a proof of the violations of human rights, of the violations of the arm trade, of the violations of so many things, and we look at the report as it's something like we read it only for 2 days, then we wait for the next report.
But the hashtags are good.
Yeah, this is the problem, that we never know how to use such instrument of international law and the Security Council. And let me just tell you that the panel during the work will be sending around 100 notes out with questions and asking for details to every country you can imagine. Israel is included. Iran is included.
The report has a list. The report has a list of all the letters sent.
It's inside the report. The amount of notes out, going out from the panel to countries, member states, asking for cooperation in this and that. For example, Sweden was asked about a device in this report, about the device being used and found in the drones as a new device that make a highly precision targeting of the drones more effective, and it's coming from Sweden, a country that is against the wars and talking about democracy, and the ambassadors is really bombarding us with values and all this stuff, and their companies are selling Iran and selling the Houthis those components. Germany, I name it, and you will have thousands and thousands of countries that they should be responsible member states. This is one. The second, we cannot blame the panel. The panel is working within the mandate of a committee, and the committee is working within the mandate of the Security Council. What they do, they work with member states. With Yemen, they start slowly leaking the findings to the government of Yemen. Step by step, we found this and this and this. And the government of Yemen you will see that the reaction will be blocking access and not cooperating. And I thought that the best way is just open access. If you said that you are having all the legitimacy, you don't have to hide things. Open your doors and work with the international community, especially that 2216 and 2140 is your instrument in the struggle to regain statehood. This is really alarming. And I want to clarify a thing. Those who think that this finding just came out of nowhere, the coalition countries, member states are approving the report. This report, through the Arab representative in the council, which is Tunisia at this time, will start talking to the coalition, to the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, to the United Arab Emirates, and Fernando understand that before going even to the approval, final approval. So every finding in this report was coordinated with Russia, with the P5, with China, with the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, with United Arab Emirates, with other countries. They have access. Any country with interest in the report will have access to the report and to the finding.
Well, Ustad Khaled, if I may interject here really quick, that I didn't mention, but when the panel goes to New York for induction to sign our paperwork, it's signed that we're hired and everything, and do the whole UN meetings, we spend a week meeting with anybody any of the missions available in New York. So we reach out to all 15 members of the UN Security Council, which are the members of the committee, of the UN Security Council committee, but we also reach out to GOI and we reach out to the coalition members. So we spend a week running from one mission to another, for 4 or 5 days, meeting with everyone face to face with the ambassadors and asking them, we're here, whatever you have, we're here, we're receptive, we need help, we need access, and often a lot of members of the committee just don't even meet with us. There's no interest. We don't need a meeting. Go ahead, thank you, congratulations, let's move on. During the year is the same thing. As you mentioned, not just the letters. If you look at the report, there's a page detailing all the letters, all the countries sent, how many letters, and who responded and who didn't. And usually 80% didn't respond. And this is not a letter just to say how we're doing, how are you, but this is for specific information. We're asking, like in Sweden, can you please tell us who sells this and why is this allowed? Or China, the same thing with the drones. There was a recommendation a while back about off-the-shelf drones to be to fall now into a special category for exports in order to avoid these things. That was 3 years ago. And something that you mentioned is if we ask GOI for information, the door closes. It's as if there was a memo sent out throughout, up and down horizontally, don't talk to the panel about this. And so we don't have information.
You're right. Also, I need to express something very important. I mean, I ask the government, ask everyone who is willing to understand international mechanisms and tools of the international law to read again this report. Not only to read the introduction, read the report from page 1 to page 80 or 100 or 260. The annexes to this report are very important to see, for example, how much work is being done, how a precisely good investigation when it comes to, for example, the transfer of arms to the Houthis. It's huge. And one of these things, if you allow me, I will go I'll try to be concise on talking about few of the findings that I consider very important. For example, the amount of information in the report on the arms transfer to the Houthis in violation of the targeted arms embargo and 2216, Article 1 and 6, it's really huge. And you see, for example, that the warlords are present everywhere. Every piece of technological, and every piece of the drones, especially the motor and the developed one, because they started with nothing. Now they have a very sophisticated engine with that goes with the satellite, and it's coming through liberated areas. It's coming from Al-Mahra. Some part of the report will talk about Oman. Some part will talk about handing in Nashtun and seaport, and it goes all the way in front of all the policing and the security and NSP and political security of Yemen, and it goes all the way handing it to Sarwah, through Sarwah to Sana'a. Everything the Houthis need to make the life of civilians in Yemen and the southern part of Saudi Arabia, it's coming through liberated areas. The warlords have a huge role in profiting from the miseries of our people and from by keeping this war going on. This is very important. The second issue is that the report, because we are not following, everything will keep loose, because you see the midterm report, although it was not published, but its findings goes into this report. I mean it's all a 1-year job. yes, the mandate is coming the 28th of March every year, and it's shortened the mandate or the first report that it should go in June. It should go out in June, because this report, for example, it covers the timing, exact timing from January 1st to December 5th. So they should hand it, as Fernando explained, it's translation, the approval and discussion, all this stuff of member states. And on the 22nd of January, it was approved by the committee. So this is very important to know also that one of these big findings of the report, and it's coming for the last 3 years, it's not something new, is the fragmentation of the central government, the fragmentation of the legitimacy, they call it deliberated areas. And you see that now it's what's happening in Taiz is a phenomenon. What's happening on control over the West Coast is another phenomenon. It's totally related. Can you tell me, Tariq, is Tariq part of the legitimacy? I'll say yes, part of the legitimacy. Why Tariq is not responding to the command and control of the Ministry of Defense, of the Ministry of Interior? Why Tariq is not a commander within the forces of the legitimacy? So this is happening with STC. I said the only way I should recognize, and it says in the report, STC found refuge within the Riyadh agreement to be recognized, although they are the same. I mean, in approach, in interoperability, in every detail, it's like the Houthi movement. Why I should not see, and this is the report saying, I'm not saying that. The report says that STC and the Houthis are in violation of 2216, not me. So, but because of the Riyadh agreement, they are part and parcel of the legitimacy. And we are asking them, and this is what I did a few days ago with Fernando. I was talking to the representative of the STC. I said, you are part of the legitimacy. You should act as one, but not at the same time you are preparing to attack the legitimacy and using all the recognition of the legitimacy given by the Riyadh agreement. So the report is finding something interesting, but it's the beginning of that. It's started to work with the warlords within the Houthi. The Houthis are all fiefdoms, or all like small kingdoms. They are working in separation, but they have common interests to stick to each other. Now we see Muhammad Ali al-Houthi is a warlord. We see Ahmed Hamid, the one who is now I don't know who is the chief of the presidency, and Abdul Karim al-Houthi. They are three trying to pull the center of power towards them. So and the issue of the attacks on civilians by the Houthis and attacks of the Saudis it's precising, and all the methods they use, not only the drones, not only the missiles. Now they are developing something very interesting. If you see in the Red Sea, they are now using improvised but experimental speedy boats. It's the boats that we use in the area, but they try to launch it. They have now the boat from, I think they brought it from Iran. It's a device that will lead the boat to through satellite also. It will bring it to Jeddah. And now they are trying, and it's getting more results by attacking international civilian shipping in the southern part of the Red Sea, as far as Jeddah seaport. And it's very dangerous because if you know, it's huge. And also the findings of the group in detailing the joint declaration, and how if we don't understand the joint declaration, we can end up having huge mistakes. It's something also we need to study. The most important issue is that the report started to look into the warlords in the liberated areas, and I really congratulate them. And the government also should congratulate them, because what they are doing is helping Yemen to keep together and to
Right.
stick together and finally achieve the goal of defeating the Houthis through negotiation. I'm not willing to talk about war, because war will not take us anywhere. War is the language of warlords. And if we want to reach peace, we can only reach peace through negotiation.
Right, Ustad. Thank you very much. I think that was detailed enough and tons of information. And thank you for highlighting all of this. I know Ustad Noman has been very patient. I just want to make a couple of comments with regards to Ustad Khaled. One thing to remember, to remind our audiences and everyone, as you mentioned, Ustad Khaled, these are not new investigations. A lot of the weapons investigations a lot of the writing on the weapons section from this year, from 2021, started in 2018, such as the batteries from Germany and the transfers. The transfer of small components from Greece, from Malaysia. And as you mentioned, a lot of these countries stopped the cooperation because they don't want the panel to push the envelope and go further on this, because this creates an international precedent. So we have to keep in mind that there's like other 14 panels working, which then could grab onto these precedents and then start pushing these member states on information. One of the other things is it is interesting that you noted that in July, I've commented, the panel could have made big recommendations that we can't access, this, on sanctions on individuals. And that it is interesting on how the U.S. sanctioned those 5 individuals, those 5 security individuals in early December of 2020, the Houthi, which in my opinion came from the July investigations, from the report in July investigations. The U.S. FTO listing was only on 3 individuals, which are already sanctioned since 2015 by the U.S. So that was nothing new. But the sanctions on the 5 individuals, like Abdul Karim, like the director of security in Sana'a, etc., that could have come. That came from IHL investigations on the panel. Lastly, this boat drones, again, investigation since 2018 when the first boats came out. If you recall, Nikki Haley had the showcase on Houthi Iranian cooperation and weapons, and the black box, that was contained by the Emiratis. The failure here was that the Emiratis gave access to a contractor, to a private company, to a private consulting company, instead of giving first access to the panel. So the credibility on all of that, diminished because of the chain of custody. But people ask, how are Houthis getting these sophisticated components and everything? The panel, for a long time, has been wanting to highlight the Mercy flights. For a long time, the panel has been wanting to highlight the flights from Muscat, from Omani territory into Sana'a, and has been blocked or has been discouraged from writing and pursuing these investigations. So now the panel finally in 2021 mentions the role of Mercy flights, which are flights used by Houthis to transfer injured people outside of the country or bring in diplomats from delegations. But this is the way that the new Iranian ambassador came to Sana'a. But Ustad Noman, thank you very much for your patience. And I know you've been taking tons of notes over here from what we've been chatting about. But your initial reaction to all of this, and what do you think of these investigations into corruption, both GOI and the Houthis?
Well, first, I'm thankful to Khaled for his what he said. I mean, the detail that I didn't know. I didn't know how that. I to be honest, I was not interested in or didn't know how the panel is picked and how the panel works and how the panel puts its report. So I was not. It's much more technical detail that Khaled was involved in when he was at the UN, and even prior to that when he was the head of the minister's cabinet in Sana'a. So I really benefited from what he said. I'm not going. First of all, I want to say that we all know this is not the first report. And then the question that will jump, and that why were people so, I would say, angry from one side or interested in knowing what's happening really in the report. I mean, that was not, because we have read reports in 2019, 2018, 2017, and they just passed. But why is this one particularly was of interest to Yemenis who follow the issue? We have to know, to understand one of the dynamics of the Yemeni politics in the past 2 years. As Khaled mentioned, there is a fragmented authority, even within the cabinet itself. And as he mentioned in his last part of his statement, the STC, let's take it as one side of the matter. The STC is theoretically part of the legitimacy, but in practice, in reality, they are not, and they say it. And to give you just a very blunt example, the governor of the governor of Aden, who was appointed by the legitimacy and the president, was in Moscow with the STC delegation. So we should now understand that there is no one legitimate entity. The only entity, in my view, and I have been saying this for years now, is the 2216. This is the lifeline of the government. It has nothing to support it on the ground except 2216, and this is why they are grasping it by their own fingers and toes. And of course, they are much needed by the coalition as an umbrella to the war that started in 2015. So understanding this dynamic within the government, that will lead us to the noise that has come up with this report, and especially on the CBY. I mean, by the way, people were not very much like looking into how arms were smuggled or the authority on the ground. Why isn't it one authority? Because we all know it. I mean, we know why, and we know that, as Khaled mentioned, the smuggling is a highly sophisticated work in Yemen and profession since years. Even during Saleh, when there was one authority on the ground, smuggling was something that everybody was complaining about. The US was complaining, the UN was complaining, the Brits were complaining, and we know so many stories about it. But then, why was this report taking all this noise and all this attention within Yemenis about, and specifically about CBY? Because there is a political rivalry between two parties of the government, and specifically the two former governors of CBY. Each one of them believes that he is more capable, more honest, more efficient, more professional to lead the CBY. And this started when the CBY moved from Sana'a to Aden in 2016, if I'm not wrong. Maybe, I think it was 2016. And I was against it, not because I know about finances, but because I talked to those who know finance, who know banking, and they said it at the time that the administration is not yet ready in Aden to come up with to function as a CBY, and we all know that it kept working from Riyadh. The CBY governor was in Riyadh, the deputy CBY in Riyadh, the member of the board were in Riyadh. So it was a very weird situation where you have a CBY, not the one in Sana'a is delegitimized. There is no one working in Aden. And then it was only the guys in Riyadh who were taking. And just an anecdote about, Khaled, I'm sure he followed it, about the salaries of the governor and the CBY deputy governor. They are the most highly paid governors of any central bank on earth, while the bank is bankrupt. So I put that on a tweet. I think it was 2017. I said it was, how can we understand it? So the breed of corruption is within the CBY. They cannot deny it. They know it. Everybody knows. And this is why the noise was so loud from both sides, both former governors, and who try to just, each one of them is coming up now with videos, with infographs, accusing the other side. So it's becoming like a black comedy now. And it's just like, I mean, we know, but we all know that they are both corrupt. I mean, I'm talking about ordinary citizen. So, I mean, putting this information to the public is just like, it's fun.
Yeah.
Okay, so we just like follow, and we love it. I mean, because we will know more details. We will know what really happened. Because every one of them is going to try to put, I mean, his self-defense papers to us.
Right.
So they will go. Now, that the government, and very, very weird that the government, and this is something that I discovered lately a couple of days ago, by the law of the CBY board should present a periodical report to the government every 3 months about their operations. That hasn't happened. So who's to be blamed here? I would blame the government, who has not put its, I mean, authority into operation, and us seeking the central bank about their report. Secondly, none, and I reiterate this, neither the governor nor the deputy governors of the central bank have any experience in banking. They don't know what's banking. I mean, they were just appointed because one was a friend of a friend, and that's okay. We can't trust this guy, so we'll just. This is a central bank. I mean, it's very, very. I mean, this is the most critical establishment, institution. Is the backbone of the government of the country. So if you start playing with the central bank, then you will see so many acts of corruption that will follow. And that was uncovered by the last report. The figures are, I mean, I would not say phenomenal, as Khaled said. It's sad. It's very sad that in a country that's bankrupt, poor, in a war, and impoverished people, and they suck $2 billion. That cannot, it's, as I said, it's just saddening. I mean, okay, we know that corruption was in Yemen all over the years. But to reach that extent in a period of war, this is a crime. This is a war crime. It's exactly like bombing people. It's not different. I mean, you are taking and it's not a grant. People should understand, it's a loan. The $2 billion, people think that the Saudis just supported Yemen with $2 billion, that it's a loan. So I don't know how, and nobody knows what is the value of our loans now. Now, the government, like, I think it's 2 days ago, when they picked Ernst & Young to be the new auditor. And we know what's Ernst & Young, and we know its reputation. It's an ill-reputed company. And we know what happened with them in Singapore. I think it's crazy. I mean, we know their problem with Enron. We know their problem in Singapore. How dare you pick that specific company? And I tweeted about it 2 days ago, and I said, I can't understand that. I mean, from all the firms on earth, you go to Ernst & Young. I'm not saying that Ernst & Young is bad, but if you come with an ill-reputed firm to audit an ill-reputed government, that will not make people happy. That will not make people satisfied. They will always keep suspicious about what is the government covering? What are they hiding?
Optics matter. I mean, I keep repeating this in almost every episode of our podcast, that optics matter, and the timing of these things matters.
Yeah. So and one point now that Khaled rightly mentioned about this fragmentation within the government. The SCC I mentioned, I don't believe that they sincerely believe that they are part of the legitimacy. The whole, as they always, okay, now they get into the government because of the leverage and the pressure that were put on them over 1 year to go and get some ministry.
It's a non-state actor. It's a non-state actor that still refuses to register as a political party.
Until this moment. The second non-state actor, in my view, is Tariq. Okay, Tariq might claim that he is fighting the Houthis, but he has never approved Hadi or gave him his consent as the commander-in-chief of the army. He did not. And we see him putting these, I don't know, the ranks on his shoulders. But it's like funny. I mean, the government, the authority has just like, it's not even divided, it's fragmented. It's just like everybody is having part of the country and they do whatever they want. We lately know about what's happening in Shabwa, about the port that has been inaugurated. And the Minister of Transport, because he is from the STC, he refused to give them any permits to receive ships. So this is again another point of how fragmented is the authority. The government has always been over the years, and Khaled, remember when we worked together in the ministry, I mean, we used to receive reports or accusations from here and there, and we used to hide. I mean, we know that. I mean, just like sometimes it was the late President Saleh and in so many incidents that he would likely uncover them, and we know that, especially when it was talking about the AQ and when talking about the smuggling of arms to Saudi Arabia or drug smuggling. We used to, we did not, I mean, we were just employees. I mean, we did not have information, but we were told that whatever we received from the Americans or the UN or the EU is not right. So, and it was always, we are targeted. I mean, Yemen is being targeted by the whole world over the years. I don't know for what reason, but this is what they used to say in the Ministry of Information. And they just said about this report. They saw this, and because I follow so many friends, I mean, they're from different factions, and they claim it's like, they are targeting the legitimate government because there is a preparation, they're preparing to amend the 2216. So they believe, and the report itself mentioned 2216 and mentioned that they did not really do it explicitly, but they said that there are actors that were not included in 2216. So if you want to include these non-state actors in 2216, then that's a new amendment, and that will open the door wide to who are, because 2216 was talking about armed militias. So now if you talk about the SCC, they have their own army. If you talk about Khaled, he has his own army. So that's another fear why the government is so concerned, worried. Because 2216, as I said at the beginning, is their own lifeline.
Yeah.
This is where they stand. This is the pillar. They have no, because they were not able to gain credibility within the population in the liberated area. They have not done anything. I was talking to a friend today in Aden, and the power cuts have come back. Yep. They started for longer hours. I mean, they were so happy for a month that it was just an hour or two a day. Now it's getting longer and longer because there is no more diesel, or I don't know what fuel they use. So I think one of what the panel should have done is what our dear friend and expert Khaled has said. They should tell them, I mean, the panel should tell people how they function. And because the government is blaming I heard it even from some of the businessmen who were mentioned in the report. One of them came and said, hey, they called the UN, and the UN told them, no, these guys are not related to us. We are just hiring them, so don't blame us. So now even the UN, I'm saying this, and they heard it.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at the finance section in previous panels reports, Ustad Noman, a lot of the information comes from companies like this. I mean, the information about the grain silos in Hodeidah, about import exports in Aden, about Mukalla, all of this comes from Yemeni companies like them. It's not just grabbed from thin air, you know.
Ilano, I understand this, but the point is that this business entity is like, because business community lives by reputation. If the reputation is tarnished, and we know, I mean, Khaled knows as well as I do know, and maybe you know, the HSA Group as an example, because they were mentioned as the largest beneficiary of the $2 billion of the Saudis, the Saudi deposit, or the 2 billion. So I talked to some of their executives, and they are worried. They are very much worried that their reputation is at stake, because how can they justify being involved in corruption and money laundering, which is even worse? I mean, because we know that, and I have an example in Spain. I have an account where I have like 8,000 euros. It took me a year to unfreeze it, to justify that I had $8,000. So it's just like, so imagine a company with billions in their accounts. So they are very much concerned, because they believe that they were targeted, and they believe that one of the former governors of the Central Bank of Yemen leaked and misinformed the panel by giving them.
Right. And Khaled Said is the largest corporation in Yemen to begin with, right? I mean, it's the most active. It's the biggest.
I mean, the figure is. I mean, if it were not normal times, the figure is okay. I mean, nobody would say anything. But because the money is not Yemen, I mean, it's a loan first. And secondly, because it was tarnished by accusations of corruption and money laundering, that for them is damaging. I mean, not in Yemen, externally, because you know, and everybody knows that banks in the West, everywhere on earth now, they are really very sensitive to these accusations of money laundering. It's just like they tremble, they shake. I mean, banks, even if it's $1,000.
And that's the thing, right? And that's the thing that's the interesting thing, that for the first that the panel used that language for the first time in a very long time, even though other actors, you know, have been included in such activities. I mean, the Khaled Said is not the only company that has done this, but it has been more. It looks more like what you're saying right now about accusations. It looks more like people that didn't get their share are jumping on Khaled Said because they didn't get their share.
No, to be very honest, I think it's the look. I mean, there is a fight, there is a feud within the government between between two clans within the government. Okay, it's political rivalry plus financial competition from one side, and it's opposed by the same group from the other side. I don't want to name anybody here, but we all know them, that the fight is there. And this is where the war of leaks is happening. Now, one of the former governors of the central bank, Mohammed Zaman, I remember when he was first appointed, and I talked to him about his salary. I said, this is not acceptable. A Yemeni central bank governor, his salary raises from $5,000 a month to $40,000 a month. This is unprecedented on earth. And he kept promising me that he will not decrease, but he will go back to the basic salary that was paid to Mohammed bin Hammam and his predecessors. And it never happened. Now, what's his name? The guy who came, Hafez Ma'yad, kept saying that he is going to call an auditing company to look into the books of the central bank, and nothing happened. And we know in Yemen, by experience, we know it by history,
Right.
that these reports will never see the light. Even this auditing company, I don't believe people will ever believe whatever report they come up with.
Right. Ustad, you brought up a couple of things that I kind of want to shed light on and expand on before we get to our friend Mohammed Shuwaiter, who just joined us. This fight is seen across the cabinet, right? A fight over the territorial fight over these financial institutions. And before it was Islah and then Motamar. Now you have Islah, Motamar, and STC fighting for these. Is like the appointment of these cabinets is basically, who's going to get a position that handles a budget that is significant, not just politically, in image wise. I fixed 10 roads instead of the guy before me fixing only 5 roads, kind of thing. But you do see this fight for financial institutions, and we saw how the cabinet, because of the Riyadh agreement, went from 35 positions to 25, including the prime minister. I've been an advocate of such a move for a long time, but for another reason, and that's for cutting the budget, not for consolidating, this practices of corruption. There's no need for a minister of tourism. You can create an agency or what have you. But Ustad Noman,
I need to make please a brief comment before we pass it to Noman, if that's possible.
Yeah. Sure.
Just let me bring this up. This quick comment is that we are 10 years from the Arab Spring, correct? We are 10 years this week from the Arab Spring, and the same issues of 2010 are happening today, just with different faces on it. Right? So it's we recorded a program, an episode about the Arab Spring and what what's happened and where Yemen is today. But where are we going with this? Where is the reform? Where is the process? The economy, there's too much focus on the conflict and no focus on the economy. People's only alternative is to join the militia, to join the army, and to your comment about 2216, Ustad, Security Belt, when they were formed, they were a militia. Then the president and the cabinet came out and said, no, they are within the Ministry of Interior. Then during the first clashes in Aden between Security Belt and the presidential protection or the army, then they went and said, these are militia. These are outside of the Ministry of Interior with Minister what was his name, the recent foreign minister that labels security forces and elite forces militia.
Yeah.
Ustad Khaled,
please let me just try to streamline some elements. 90% of the report is in favor of the government, in favor of the legitimacy. Yeah. And I don't know why you should be upset. But because you don't know how to utilize such a very important and strong element of international law and the endorsement of the council, you fail to use it. So you blame that it's the lack of methodology and all this stuff. This is one. And I need also to underline that please look into the Somalia effect. Somalia warlords took the country for a long time. And this is what we are doing in Yemen by not enforcing.
Ustad. Sorry, Ustad, continue. Sorry for cutting you off.
Okay, this is what I was saying, just that 90% of the entire report is in favor of the government. Why we should be upset with the 10% that will criticize? We should look into that as something to streamlining our efforts to work with the government to enhance the presence of the government of the people of Yemen. This is very important. And I call upon everyone when reading such reports to think about Somalia. Warlords took Somalia to a total devastation, fragmentation, and misery. And if you want to go that path, it's much easier. If we keep saying that no, we give priority to the war, we will continue warring, we will defeat them. the report said that the government of Yemen lost all its superiority on the ground. The Houthis are now on the doors of Marib, and yesterday, you remember what happened. They keep trying to break Marib, and the Houthis are close to Aden, and the Houthis are in everywhere, and they are recovering that. I mean, Drahimi was our, small spot that we used to put the government close to Hodeidah, because it was only a few minutes from the city. Now Drahimi was taken back. Come on, you're still thinking that war will bring about the victory. What victory? Houthis can be easily defeated in politics because they don't have any knowledge of politics. They are really warlords coming. I mean, they are militias coming out of the jungle, and what they only know is fighting. They know how to use arms, and they will keep defeating you. If you want to go to the path of Somalia, it's so clear. Please, I want everybody to read the reports of Somalia. If the Security Council, there is a panel that worked for quite a long time on Somalia.
Right. Ustad Khaled, if I may, Ustad Noman might have to leave us at the moment. We really appreciate you being with us.
A final word before I go.
Definitely.
No, I was really happy to participate, but unfortunately, I thought it was just 1 hour. But I'm happy to see Mohammed. He's the son of Abdul Daim.
No, he's my uncle. I'm son of Abdul Qadir. Okay. Pleasure to meet you.
Okay. Yalla, good luck. Khaled, we'll keep in touch.
Thank you very much, Ustad.
Take care.
Thank you. Good night. Thank you.
Bye.
So one last comment, please. That I think the government presence in Aden is a challenging moment, and it's very important. If they want to continue the struggle for peace, they should stay in their country, on the ground, and this will help gather all the international support, all the international presence in Aden, and as you mentioned yesterday, the presence of the international community in Aden was our old attempt to bring international community to Aden and work together. And one of the recommendations of the report, I will end here, you know that the panel should go to Aden to investigate the CBY, the airport incident of the December 30th. And because of the corona limitations, the panel couldn't visit Aden, but they will do that. And I think it's very important for the government to work overtly and be cooperative with the panel. This is very important. And one last comment, one of the very important recommendations of the report, if you see in the last pages, is saying about the need to reinvigorate the Coast Guard. It's very important. The absence of the Coast Guard in Yemen is giving the warlords and giving the smugglers all these chances to work and use Yemen territorial and seaports, and also they are creating new seaports. Warlords are looking how to get Yemen into chunks of fiefdoms where they can just absorb every small drop of water, every small piece of life, and convert it into dollars and invest it in their own accounts.
Right. Ustad, good night, Ustad Noman. Thank you for joining us. Really appreciate you. Thank you. Good night.
Pleasure meeting you.
Ustad Khaled, a couple of points. I mean, one of the things I got tons of messages from people asking me about the panel after the initial reports came out and right before the visit from the panel last week. And the first thing I told them is the report is done. There's nothing you can do about it. It can't be changed. Don't expect that. Don't think that because if you call the panel and you go to New York and you visit and you talk to them, that there's going to be some sort of rewriting or editing. The report is done.
It's done.
You can't change it. And this whole thing, about the visit last week, I told them it's just a courtesy visit. There is nothing to investigate in Aden. The scene is contaminated from day one. They cleaned up and they put everything away on day one. There's nothing of chain of custody. We saw the government of Yemen, the Ministry of Interior, give this presentation with the fragments and pointing to the Houthis and everything. The UN panel can no longer use that as evidence because it's been contaminated. They were not recovered from the ground. If you go to the airport was cleaned the night of December 30th because everybody wanted to start operating the next day. There were no international investigators. There was no nothing. We did, myself and two people on Twitter. We did this graphics based on geolocating the videos and the path of the missiles, where it's clear where they came from beyond Taiz, right, which is Houthi held territory. But we're not investigators. We're not professional. Somebody needed to access that scene that very same day, and it didn't happen. And I told them, you need to start thinking about April 2021 when your relationship with the panel, because this report is finished. It's done. There's nothing you can do. My last point to your issue of the Coast Guard, we know that, again, this is a money pit. There's so many people fighting within the government over the Coast Guard. Is it in Mukalla? Is it in Aden? Do the Brits do the training? Do the Americans do the training? Do the Germans do the training? Who's bidding? Who's paying? It's a mess as well with the Coast Guard. Now we want to move on to our second section with the IHL, with my good friend Mohammed al-Shuwaiter joining us from Ontario. Good afternoon, Mohammed.
Good afternoon, Fernando. Thank you for having me, and sorry for I couldn't join before. I had another meeting.
No worries. Yeah. Mohammed is a lawyer. He's a expert in law affairs, legal affairs, and he's here to help us understand the IHL portion of the UN panel of experts report. Ustad Khaled, do you want to make some comments regarding this section?
No, I really I'm waiting to hear from Shuwaiter. I think it's very important to bring young people with fresh views on what's happening in Yemen, what's happening in the UN reporting. I think our young generation will be contributing to the peace building in Yemen, and they will shoulder the heavy part of everything we are already facing out. And age cannot, have but this logic. And I welcome, and I'm here, even though I'm really, I have another commitments, but I will be listening to Shuwaiter because it's interesting to hear from him.
Thank you.
It's my pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you, Mohammed. So let's jump right in. I'm a critic. I've been a critic of the last two reports with the IHL portions because I think they should have been more detailed. They should have been expanded. There's so much to investigate. There's so much that's missing. As we mentioned from the beginning of this episode, this report is about 30 pages short of the usual other panel reports. The panel did a great job in Taiz, looking at Taiz and the use of schools. Excellent job. But we don't see the other side, right? We don't see the Ansarallah, the Houthi side in Taiz. We don't see anything of what's going on in Hodeidah. We don't see anything of what's going on in Ib, for example. We don't know. We don't read about Al-Baida or Shabwa, Al-Baida or Marib, the border area. We didn't read anything about what started, what sparked the war in Baida, right? Against Radman, against Sheikh Yasser al-Awadi, that then turned into a counterterrorism operation into Haifa and into southern Marib. We don't read anything about the shelling in Zala either. So while the investigations that they did conduct were great, were detailed, there's so much missing, and I want to know why it's missing. But before we get into that, I do want to ask you a question about what is in the report, your opinion on what you see, what you read in the report from an expert's point of view.
Yeah, thank you, Fernando. First of all, before answering these questions, I want to bring a note because it's lead to a lot of misunderstanding of the IHL mandate, and they confuse the IHL with the general international law. So when people listen for international for the violations of international humanitarian law, which is law of war, they confuse it with the right to war, and that's when people start. They don't want to hear about the report because they see, oh, it's in the favor of one party to the another. So it's important to distinguish between the right to war, just at bello, and just in bello, which is the IHL, the law of war. So the situation of which has the right or which has wrong, I mean, it doesn't matter of IHL. IHL only concerned about the violations of the human right, the international humanitarian law. The conduct has nothing to do with who has the right to wage the war. Though it's clearly that's it's from day one, the UN has clearly said that it's non-international armed conflict, meaning that the state is in the position and other keeping all reports mentioning them as non-state actors. So I mean the reports covering two sides, the IHL and the international law in both. Back to your question, I mean, I mentioned this because it's important to realize the difference between IHL as part of the international law, but it doesn't cover who has right and who's wrong, who's the de facto and who's the de jure entity or authority. So back to your question, yes, why the report couldn't cover a lot of violations or incidents in Bayda, in Hudaydah, and a lot of things. And I guess this question should be addressed by the panel, why they couldn't cover the incident only in small part of Yemen. Back to the question, which is, the question, Fernando, are you here?
I'm here. No. My question was just, on what you read, what caught your eye from the panel report.
What caught my eye, I mean, interests me. That's the panel. The report become more louder and explicit on those who violated the international humanitarian law, who violating the international law, naming the people, individuals and entities. They mentioned the government, they mentioned the United Arab Emirates, they mentioned the STC, they mentioned, in specific names, and it's become more louder and explicit, calling the UN Security Council to consider a panel or a penalty or a tribunal for these violations. It's for me, I see the report is more explicit than the UN envoy statements and diplomacy. So the UN envoy, he worked as a moderator, so he doesn't want to mention who's violating the human rights, who is an obstacle for holding a peace agreement. While the report is free, it's independent, and it's not just one person. There are multiple. It's a panel, so it was more clear, as I said, explicit. Where is the violations and who is causing these violations, and calling for a tribunal to punish the committed the crimes.
Right, Ustad Khaled, this is something what Mohammed is mentioning right now. This is something we discussed in previous episodes, and something very interesting. I mean, this interaction within the UN structure, right? It's a mess. I mean, you have the UN envoy doing something and being accused of being too pro Houthi, for example. We keep seeing these hashtag campaigns against him, but then we have the Council on Human Rights that has a panel on Yemen based in Beirut, who also produce 2 reports a year and have also been criticized. I remember their first panel, their first report of this council was primarily criticized because they called Abdul Malik al-Houthi the leader of the revolution, which had not been done, and this violates, everything that the UN had been saying. But then, second, it's been criticized. This panel has been criticized because they don't have any access. The last time that the panel was in Aden, there was a car bomb outside of Shalal's home. And I don't believe that they've been to Aden or Sana'a since then. And that was 2 years ago.
This is something that we discussed with the Secretary General during my time when I was a minister. I said, I can hear a united voice of the United Nations in Yemen. I see a lot of voices, different voices, and I'm thankful to Mohammed that he brought to this issue. For example, we have 5 mandates on Yemen. We have the Office of the Special Envoy. Okay, we have the resident coordinator, which is the overall umbrella president in Yemen, which is it was Liz Grandi, remember, and this is coordinating all the UN agencies working on the ground. And we have the political mandate on Hodeidah. We have Amma and General Goya, and they are just sitting doing nothing because the parties are not interested in implementing the Stockholm Agreement. But the mandate is there, and once you establish a mandate in the UN, you cannot close it. It's totally complicated. And Mohammed
money
from international law, and they are receiving almost in 2 years now more than 110 million, and doing nothing. We say, okay, what will happen with the Stockholm Agreement? Say, no, the parties are not interested. So why do we have Al-Maha if we have the UNVIM mechanism that is also non-functional because the smuggling is going on a daily basis. And the Al-Maha and the UNVIM is working in Djibouti. I don't know if they are still working because I don't see reports on
working.
Yeah, and that one also has its own budget and its own money and all.
Doesn't matter where. Once you create a bureaucracy, you cannot close that bureaucracy.
The only UN mission, the only political mission of the United Nations or the peacekeeping mission that was open and closed was the Timor-Leste. That's the only UN mission that was open and closed. South Lebanon is for now 30 years is functioning. Every small, you can imagine. This is the UN. But we raised this issue, and the UN needs to streamline the work of its agencies in Yemen. And it's really a messy.
Here's another look at this problem.
But let me, before ending, just give me 1 second. And also because of the limitations of the panel of experts, as Mohammed mentioned, they only covered maybe 10% of the issues in Yemen because they can't cover what's happening in Beirut. They don't have access. They can depend, as Mohammed mentioned, they can depend on reports that somebody is sitting there and reporting to you and you use it as a document of the UN. They need to verify, they need to get control of things before in the investigation process to respond to the international humanitarian law. They need to be there. They cannot tell you, for example, no, we receive reports that the Houthis are doing that. That's why when the panel or any other agency, the UN, asking the Houthis to have access, it's not necessarily to attack the Houthis all the time, but to get their views. When the central bank, and I didn't mention that with the presence of Mustapha, when the central bank received the first draft of the report, there were no reaction at all, and everything were there. Maybe nobody was reading that. And also they get the information and they get the forms from the central bank. I mean, my friend, the Tunisian, who is investigating the economic and financial part of the report, has worked with the central bank and got all this information from the central bank. Then he is criticized because he's unfair, lack of credibility, and all this stuff. He was working with the central bank. I'm telling you, it's nonsense.
Yeah, I mean, when there is no room to criticize the methodology, when there's no room to criticize the information, then it becomes a personal attack on capacity on the individual expert, which is ridiculous. I mean, they're there for a reason. They can look at their CV, they can look at everything. So, this is ridiculous on the attacks, and trust me, I experienced that. But one of the things that you just mentioned right now, and it's the length or what they cannot cover, or the panel cannot cover, or what it covers. One of the interesting things, like a bureaucracy, you can't give the consumer everything you have, and they say you have to keep them thirsty. You have to keep the panel, you have to keep the committee hungry for more, thirsty for more information. Another thing I forgot to mention when Mustapha Noman was here is, these members of the Security Council Committee, they don't have the capacity to consume everything that the panel can provide for them either. They don't have. Not everybody is has a P5 capacity with intelligence, with the State Department, Foreign Ministry capacity. A lot of their political officers for these missions are very focused on one or two things. Sweden has been focused on Stockholm since 2018. But other missions are focused on, like Japan, on humanitarian assistance and everything. And the only time that we get to actually talk about Yemen openly, without acronyms, without the background or anything, is when we meet the Yemen desk people from the UN Secretariat, where we actually exchange, where we actually have a face-to-face conversation. But back to the rivalry, and to Mohammed's point, you did mention the country directors, that Khaled, and all the UN agencies don't like the panel to come in, because then we use their safe haven, we use their vehicles, we run around saying that it's the UN, and then they say we get a backlash from your report, because then actors working in Abyan, actors working in Taiz, working in Hodeidah, will blame us, the UN, for giving you access and giving you information, and then they don't want to cooperate with us. So that's the problem with the Houthis in Sana'a too. That if the UN panel, that if the UN agencies or the NGOs, in Sana'a, you saw how they were silenced. NGOs were silenced in Sana'a without access to social media or meetings, etc. That if they're seen to cooperate, then there's retribution against them. And the UN agencies, was WFP, the WHO, OSHA, they're very afraid, excuse me, of the backlash on their work. And you're right, there is no cooperation. The panel cannot share their information with other individuals, but the panel asks everybody for information. Yeah. There is no cooperation between the 2140 panel and the human rights panel in Beirut, because they can't cooperate. You see, so it is. We touched about how important on the last episode. We touched about how important this U.S. envoy is to coordinating the U.S. policy toward the Yemeni conflict. Right? We don't have that in the UN. We don't have that structure there. Everybody's on their own.
It goes back to the big war inside the United Nations between the Secretariat and the bodies. Between the Secretariat, totally an independent body, and the Security Council as another very important body to secure peace and stability in the world, and between the General Assembly. So the General Assembly is out and defeated. The Secretariat are taking the lead, and we were fighting all the time that what's my role as the permanent representative of Yemen? I'm more important than the Secretary General when it comes to the United Nations, because we are member states. But we never been respected and looked at as such.
Right. Mohammed, with regards to the panel report and the investigations, again, focusing, I want to talk to you about this issue. Let's create a balance here. For example, detentions, that happened by every actor. They're taking place in Sana'a, they're taking place in Taiz, they're taking place in Shabwa, in Marib, in Aden. The legitimacy of these detentions, justifications within human rights, humanitarian law and IHL. And then next is what the panel highlighted regarding the use of schools. These are structures. Some actors will say, well, there's no school, there's no classes, and these are just buildings that we need, but these are government buildings. And these are I wrote about Taiz in 2017 about how ISIS and AQ took over police stations and mosques and schools in the center of Taiz under a Sayla area and 26 September road. And now we see how brigades from the legitimate army, the national army, and the Maghlafi's brigade, a non-state actor militia, they took over these schools. And the Houthis then came out. I recall this in 2018, 2019, the Houthis shelling these areas, and the propaganda online, or the initial response online from Houthi rivals, is the Houthis are shelling schools. They're trying to kill our children. But the reality now that we see from this panel reporting on these schools is there were no children, and they were not being used as schools. They were used as militia and military headquarters. So when does this target become a legitimate target? And when are the Houthis then violating IHL, not just the government forces, but the Houthis? Are the Houthis violating IHL by shelling these structures?
Yeah, thank you. Well, I guess there are a lot of points. I'll try to go through them. First of all, the report, we shouldn't forget that the report, like accusing everyone, including the government, the Houthis, STC, by violating international humanitarian law. All of them committed war crimes, actually, and that's why the report calling the UN to consider establishing a tribunal on these crimes in Yemen. I also before going to these, following to the note that as the conflict in Yemen, and the report clearly said, mentioning the Yemeni government and the non-state actors, referring to the STC and the Houthis. That's the credit, as the Minister Khaled mentioned, a credit for the government. That's in the first place. All what these non-state actors actions undermining the state is illegal from the first place, and then what they do, what everyone doing, including the government, violating the IHL, it's a crime. So, regarding the detainees, I guess from the first place, the UN itself has been confused about the detainees in Yemen. As you know, the Stockholm Agreement refers to the detainees in Yemen as prisoners, and which is its conflict with the UN describing or designating the conflict in Yemen as non-international armed conflict, which the main difference between non-international armed conflict and international armed conflict is the title of the detainees. So they shouldn't use the title of prisoners, because prisoners of war, it's only as it's one of the basic or the main difference between the international armed conflict IAC and non-international armed conflict NIAC. So, but the UN itself confuses these. So that's first of all. The detainees really one of the main. The violations that everyone committed. However, I guess the report was more clearly that the Houthis been using them, and they committed everyone been accused for torturing, which is a war crime. But also the report been mentioning the journalist detainees, mentioned that's been using the civilian detainees to switch to exchange with fighters from the Houthi side. So it was more clearly for that. For the schools, which is a really interesting point, that's when the civilian objects become a military object. When it's become like that, it's lose its protection under the IHL. Under the IHL, one of the main principles of the IHL is to distinguish the distinction between the civilian object and military object, and that's mean only military object been using for military advantages can be used as a target for a military target. However, when the defender using taking human shield, or using schools or hospitals or houses for civilians, and then they are become the one who blame for targeting the civilians. So the distinction between civilian objects and military objects, it's an obligation for both the attacker and the defender not to target a civilian object, and the defender not to use the civilian object for military advances. But however, it's very hard. It should be addressed case by case, because you need to. When the defender will say, well, the Houthis using the school for military object, or when the Houthis will say the other are using school or hospital for military purposes, then the proof will be the burden for the proof will be for the attackers to prove that this civilian object, this civilian object been used for military purposes. And I guess this has been used by everyone. So, when the airstrikes happen in a very dense populated areas, and then we'll say there's a military bases or schools, they are the one who has to prove that's a civilian object been turned to a military object. The same way when the Houthis will launch missiles on a highly populated civilian area in Taiz, and they say, "Oh, these turned the school for a military object." They are the one who has to prove that this object been turned to a military object.
Right.
Is that answering your question?
Yeah.
Fernando.
Yes.
I might disagree with Mohammed, because I refer him to the agreement in Stockholm on the prisoners. It's not about prisoners only. The agreement stated prisoners, detainees, disappearance, and all sort of kidnapping, and it's really covering all these, because the final report, today's report, is mentioning that the Houthis are also arresting people from the street and using them in the swamp. Just to say,
yeah, I do agree with you. I agree with you. No, I agree with you. They use the detainees, the term of detainees, but the term prisoners shouldn't be used, because it's identified by the UN as non-international armed conflict. And within international armed conflict, based on the Geneva Convention, they only use term detainees or internees.
Yeah.
But they don't use prisoner. That's all what I wanted to say.
Yeah, and I do want to touch on these two things, Ustad Khaled and Mohammed. For example, with regards to the targeting of civilian object structures, etc., facilities. We have the incident of the airstrike on the school bus, right, in Hajj 2018, and we went through that investigation, and others on social media. I can only focus on this open source investigation, not on what we did, but I'll point to that, what we saw on Twitter and social media back then in 2019 regarding this incident. There was a lot of evidence pointing to the Houthi using this particular type of bus, school bus, to transport commanders within Hajj and Sada. And Jihad and the coalition looked at this, and they pointed to a particular commander that was suspected of being on this bus, and they pointed to the the route of this bus from a Houthi camp into the city. It was just the timing that nobody could understand, including the Americans, could understand why the coalition took so long to hit at that bus, before it entered the city. That they were tracing the bus for about 30 minutes. They're asking, if you knew that the commanders and the militia were in the bus, why did you wait until it arrived and it was parked in the city by the souk? So we would have had a very different debate, very different discussion had the bus been hit on the road on its own, and then there would have been no chance for this propaganda of throwing, backpacks from a camp that happened months before that strike. So that was another thing that came out on the investigation that was put on social media. That if you looked at the children that were claimed to be on that bus, they had been on the summer camp months before. Not that day, not that week. Nobody's doubting that this bus was used for the camp, just the timing.
Yeah, but we let me just tell you that the coalition issued a detailed report on what happened.
Right.
I think it was the slow reaction of the command and control on acting. I think they have their interoperability ready on the space. Then something happened. They removed that. So once they took the decision, their interoperabilities were not ready in the space. That's why they had to bring it back. And when they came, they targeted without knowing,
right,
getting the precise. And this is happening in wars, but the coalition worked in details this report, and they said that some of the officers are under investigation. And let me just emphasize what Mohammed was mentioning. It's very important. In all these civil wars and wars like what's happening in Yemen, always people are asked by the UN and asked by the international observers to have the non-target list. So the non-target list is huge in Yemen. I remember I saw it in the coalition room in the operation room in Riyadh, and it's huge. But what happened, as Mohammed Shuwaiter said, people use the safe havens as centers for their operations, for their command and control, for their forces and because they think that it will be safer there. Then you attack that, and as he mentioned, everybody has a responsibility. Those who have the non-target list being violated, and those who are using the civilian infrastructure. And in Yemen, every time that we go further in this war, deeper in this war, we will keep committing more international humanitarian law violations, because war is devastating Yemen, and there is no reasoning, no wisdom. It's just killing everyone in front of you. What's happening in Gaza is really an example of the inhuman phase of this war.
Right.
Can I say something?
Yeah, give me one quick second, and then I'll give you the word, and we're gonna have to close it in with your comments. We'll close with your comments, Mohammed. But one of these issues, Ustad, and you were involved in the Stockholm agreement and the Stockholm plan, and this big finding that Mohammed mentioned regarding the practice by Houthis of kidnapping new rivals, new opponents, new dissenters, kidnapping them, imprisoning them, and then instead of, dealing with the previously detained, disappeared individuals in the detainee exchange, they use these new detainees for the exchange. So then, the families of people that have been in jail for 3 or 4 years, they're still waiting. They're still wondering what benefit is Stockholm for them if their relatives are still in jail. And for the other parties, for GOY and the coalition, why would they engage in another prisoner exchange where they're not addressing the real problem of the prisoner detainee issue? It appears that any agreement on a prisoner exchange merely creates more detainees. It adds to the numbers. So, while this last detainee prisoner exchange in October was praised as the largest, in history and blah, 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 and a great progress and everything, okay, the Houthis exchanged 500, but then there's still 2,000 in jail. The Saudis are not getting their officers out, which are in a couple of dozen. The Americans keep getting one at a time. we don't know how many other U.S. nationals are in jail at the PSO or National Security Prison in Sana'a or Taiz. But Mohammed, your comments regarding this, and I know that we've been here a while, and Ustad Khaled has to run, but your comments, Mohammed, on all of this.
Yeah, my comment, first of all, regarding the bus or other incidents, that's why we need an independent investigation group in Yemen, because each incident or violations of international humanitarian law, it's hard to dig deep and to get the real picture. Because everyone who can claim, oh, this is a civilian object or this is a military object, or because a lot of conditions can switch the decision, which was legit or legitimate target. And as Minister Khaled mentioned, that's the war is devastating. So however we have rules under the IHL, we cannot determine each violations, who is the wrong, who is the right, because a lot of conditions, based on these conditions, the facts, you will say, oh, this is the perpetrator, and this is it's not, the blame is in this side or not on this side. A lot of these violations you cannot mention who's the wrongdoing, because it will end up without any evidence. And as Mr. Khaled also mentioned, that the panel on many of their reports relying on other reports, which they don't have the first-hand evidence. However, in many of the violations it's been mentioned in the report, I see it, they say they have it's based on evidence. Sometimes the language will be vague. It come to our attention, and sometimes they will say it's come to our evidence. We have this violations committed by such a person. So it's not all the reports are based on other reports. Also, as regarding to the detainees you mentioned, I guess the UN can put more pressure on both sides, all parties having detainees, and they have mandate, they have pressure. The UN is not just a moderator. They have the UN Security Council. They can use such a power to on both sides to at least limit the more detainees, and be switching civilians with combatants. That's unacceptable. Right. If the UN will stick to the international law and international humanitarian law.
Right. Well, we're going to have to leave it there, gentlemen. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you for joining us. Your insight, always appreciated. Mohammed, thank you very much, my friend. Really appreciate your insight. Ustad Khaled, our friend, our main friend. Muchas gracias. Muchísimas gracias otra vez. De nuevo.
Thank you. So a pleasure. It was a pleasure being with you all.
Thank you. And to our audience, don't forget to keep up with our podcast. We already have 5 out in less than a month. So we've been busy. But thank you very much to everyone. We look forward to our next conversation, our next podcast. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Follow all the audio on Anchor and Spotify. And we'll be tweeting again pretty soon about our upcoming episodes. Thank you very much, gentlemen. Have a good day.
Bye-bye.
Ma salama. Thank you.
Ma salama.